Welcome back, you guys, to the 2023 Knoxville Regional Championships Top Cut. My name is Maeve O'Rourke. I am joined by Jake Muller, and this is one of the most exciting Top Cuts I have seen in a very, very long time. And there's some big surprises in here.
Yeah,
It's pretty standard, but take a look at our players. Justin Tang on the left, Justin Carris on the right. One more seasoned player and one in their very first event in the first seed after 14 rounds of Swiss. Looking at Justin's team, Fluttermane, Arcanine, Palafin, Amoonguss, Iron Hands, and Gothitelle. A really cool team with some big meta picks here.
I really like this team. I think it sets up Palafin very well. Iron Hands Amoonguss Palafin is so strong just because there's the option to pivot with Volt Switch. Amoonguss protects Palafin very, very well from a lot of things that threaten it with that Rage Powder, and you can keep it healthy with that Pollen Puff, two things that Palafin loves to see. A lot of times we've been talking about how Palafin doesn't like to play against Gothitelle because you can't switch out and activate that 0 to hero, which we are about to see. Justin Carris does have a Gothitelle of his own, but Justin Tang also taking the opposite and saying, I can force my Palafin into strong positions with my own Gothitelle, with my own Shadow Tag, and make sure that you are set up very well to start throwing off some very powerful Wave Crashes or Jet Punches.
Yeah, and I mean, even having the opportunity to switch out with your own Fluttermane is huge, but here is Justin Carris. Look at those achievements here. Just a couple of weeks ago in our Day 2, that top 32 for Orlando, 2017 Madison Regionals top 8, 2016 Worlds top 8, multiple time NAIC Day 2 player as well. Really a lot of great experience. He's been working with this team, with his team building group for a couple of weeks, probably a couple months now, right?
At this point,
and
yeah.
here it is, Great Tusk, Gothitelle, Iron Bundle, Fluttermane, Tyranitar, and the Talonflame. And Tyranitar feels like a really fun Pokemon here because we saw him pilot it so well at the start of the day on day 1.
Yeah, if you look at Justin Tang's team as well, there's not a whole lot that deals with a Tyranitar after it's terastallized. You do have the Thunder Punch on Iron Hands instead of the Wild Charge, so it's a lot less immediate damage. However, one thing I would love to highlight is the Iron Hands on Justin Tang's side. We've been seeing a lot of Assault Vest here. One of the most common items, probably the most common item on Iron Hands, because it is so naturally bulky that Assault Vest gives it so much more special defense to complement its very high HP and defense. However, Justin Tang opting for a different set. He's running Safety Goggles with Swords Dance and Terra Fire, which is something that picked up a lot, like very beginning of Series 2, that was a very common set, and then kind of fell off really quickly in favor of Assault Vest. But Justin Tang sticking with it, and I love it. Like Fake Out, Drain Punch, Thunder Punch, Swords Dance is a really, really good set on Iron Hands. It creates so much room.
Yeah, I believe Nick Navarre ran Swords Dance Iron Hands in Orlando, and I think it served him very well. One of those Pokemon that Iron Hands, when you have the Sword Stance as a move, you typically don't invest as much into your attack stat, and you invest it more into the bulk. And that means that once you get those Sword Stances up, you're incredibly strong, and you do not take a lot of damage. And that's sometimes the sacrifice of the Assault Vest. You're not, instead of taking, less damage from special attacks, then you're just kind of taking less damage in general, depending on how you end up training your Pokemon. And I think that's going to be a really interesting thing to have moving forward. There's a lot of really nice choices, I think, on Justin Tang's team as well. The Amoonguss's Covert Cloak, that's not exactly something you see all the time. Arcanine running that Mago Berry as well. So Gothitelle being the Citrus Berry holder out of the couple of Pokemon on this team that may want to have that Citrus Berry, and then Focus Sash on the Fluttermane. So this is something you kind of see when you see these teams, like for players like Justin Carris, who was building with Yotam and Toller and Dan Fitzpatrick and Colin Hire, I think he said, joined the church. You see these teams that feel pretty standard. You feel like you've seen them a lot, and then you have a player like Justin Tang come in and they bring something that's a little bit different, and you may not be as prepared for it.
Yeah, it's a lot of sets that you might have seen in metas past. Like if you look at the Arcanine, Mago Berry was one of the most common items among the other like large citrus berries, as we used to call them colloquially. But unfortunately not healing that 50% anymore, but a lot of times Arcanine is a Pokemon that takes chip damage very well, and the payoff from using Mago Berry instead of Citrus Berry is that you heal a little bit more. You heal, I believe, 3/8 of your health. 3/8 of your health instead of 1/4 of your health. And you do have to wait to activate it until you're under 25% of your health, but Arcanine switches into attacks very well. It's not super hard to get yourself into a position where you can make sure your health falls between 0 and 25% to activate that berry.
Yeah, those pinch berries definitely received a little bit of a nerf between a couple of generations ago, so you don't see them nearly as much as you used to back in the Sun and Moon days. However, these trainers here, they're going to be getting ready for what is, I'm sure, going to be an incredible top 8 matchup. Looking at Justin Carris, his lead is going to be Fluttermane and Gothitelle, whereas Justin Tang will be leading Fluttermane and Gothitelle also, so we can switch out of Shadow Tag.
Oh, great. Here we go. Yeah, no Shadow Tag trapped Pokemon in this scenario just because Shadow Tag precludes you from being trapped by an opposing Shadow Tag, and obviously the Fluttermanes are both Ghost type. This is very interesting here, depending on how these Pokemon are trained speed-wise. They have played each other already in this tournament earlier in Swiss, so perhaps they know which Fluttermane is faster. We don't have that information just yet, so we have to assume these players are going to be very careful if they also don't have that info, because losing a Fluttermane turn 1 just to a stray Fluttermane Shadow Ball from the other end, a little bit scary. Although we're looking at the team to use Justin Tang's, it does have that Focus Sash, actually a layer of protection he has there for himself.
Yeah, the Focus Sash may be pretty nice here. Gothitelle protecting on Justin Tang's side, the Fluttermane on his side as well, going for the Shadow Ball into Justin Carris's Fluttermane. Does about 3/4 of that damage there, and the Shadow Ball firing right back at it from Justin Carris's into Justin Tang's does bring it down to the Focus Sash here. So it means at this point, not going to be able to take another one of those. But here's an interesting fact is that Justin Tang actually beat Justin Carris in Swiss. Gothitelle going for a taunt here into the Protect on the Gothitelle on the opposite side. Definitely, I think, a smart Protect to kind of just see what the bait is at this point, but I think you need some big knockouts right now.
I think knowing that Justin Carris's Gothitelle has Thunder Wave and Justin Tang's has Trick Room, that's a very safe taunt if you ask me, just because the Trick Room Gothitelle likely trained to be slower than Justin's Gothitelle with that taunt, with that Thunder Wave that wants to take advantage of higher speeds. The Shadow Ball's trading, it makes a lot of sense. Like the Fluttermane being Focus Sash on Justin Tang's end means it's probably trained to be as fast and as strong as it possibly can be. We did see the Shadow Ball do not enough to the Fluttermane on Justin Carris's end, just because we've seen the Fluttermanes on that team be very bulky in the past, both here and at Orlando on streams, and so that kind of playing out, taking some damage trades where they could, but now if you're Justin Tang, you do threaten a KO onto the Fluttermane on the opposing side.
Finally, a Pokemon that can be affected by Shadow Tag. Amoonguss is going to switch in here for the Gothitelle on Justin Tang's side. Something that could handle this damage. A Moonblast, though, into the Fluttermane is enough to get the knockout, and I think that's a great way to cover for a switch in as well. If that Fluttermane chose to switch out, definitely showing, I think, the speeds here. Gothitelle's taunt, though, into the Amoonguss is a little bit tough, but if you go for something like a Pollen Puff into your partner, could be pretty nice.
Yeah, I get that switch. You know, if you possibly try to cover for Justin Carris, opting for a knockout on that Fluttermane with the Psychic, that would surely knock out a 1 HP Fluttermane. You do get that Amoonguss in essentially for free and not taunted, but now we have a taunted Amoonguss locked on the field. Only you can use Pollen Puff. We've seen this with John Hu's Jumpluff earlier today, that it was taunted and could only use Pollen Puff. That's not a great place to be, especially if you're an Amoonguss looking down an Iron Bundle. You can't, you can possibly survive a freeze drive and put it to sleep to punish it. All you can do is Pollen Puff, and considering the Fluttermane is at 1 HP, and the Gothitelle and Iron Bundle are both faster, you really will not get a chance to Pollen Puff this Fluttermane on this turn.
Yeah, Justin bringing his fastest Pokemon in right now, and that is that Booster Energy Iron Bundle, and that thing can do a lot of damage, and your best answer is the Amoonguss, but Amoonguss is now going to Terrasilize into the Dark type to stop a potential Psychic coming its way. Really cool defensive Terrasilization, and this also helps with Prankster too. Fluttermane protecting this turn is not going to want to take any damage from either of those two Pokemon on the opposite side of the field. The Icy Wind makes a lot of sense, a really easy double target there. Does not go into the Fluttermane, does connect onto the Amoonguss, drops the Amoonguss's speed. Amoonguss is not too worried. Actually, no, it's Cobra Cloak, so it doesn't drop the speed there. Psychic type also into the Amoonguss, going in, and the Pollen Puff into the Iron Bundle. So Covert Cloak showing exactly how good of an item it can be, and it's one of the ones that you don't see very often on the Amoonguss.
Yeah, I think the intended use for Covert Cloak on Amoonguss is usually so you don't take the Salt Cure residual damage from Garganacl, which can be very big. However, that Pollen Puff doing actually a decent chunk to the Iron Bundle. I think that might be a 3-hit knockout, and especially considering that the Amoonguss Terrasilize away from an Ice Weakness and into a Psychic immunity, it's going to be really hard for Justin Carris to knock that out very quickly.
Yeah, you've got this Gothitelle now switching in here, and that gives you some fake out pressure. Thunder Wave into the Amoonguss is going to slow it down.
Yes.
There we go. That's something that will slow that Amoonguss down, right? Yeah, can't Covert Cloak a Thunder Wave here, but it does get the Pollen Puff off once again into this Iron Bundle. That's definitely a 3-hit knockout. Taunt is also now over, so you have a great opportunity here to maybe go for something like a Fake Out or a Spore as well. well into the Gothitelle if you're thinking about it.
We know that Justin Carris' Gothitelle does not have Protect, so a possible Fake Out and Spore into that slot would most certainly put something to sleep, which could be really big for Justin Tang. You know, he's already took one knockout, the Flutter Mane is gone, the Iron Bundle is in range for one more Pollen Puff, or most certainly a Psychic from that Gothitelle as well. And so even though the Amoonguss came in and immediately got taunted, it's actually been putting in a lot of work here, because putting this Iron Bundle down so low means that there's really no other attack that it can take and still remain on the field.
Yeah, Amoonguss definitely looking like a strong physical attacker with Pollen Puff, right? Iron Bundle's not exactly the strongest of Pokemon defensively. However, the Gothitelle here is going to go for the Terrasilize here with the Terra Grass. Makes a lot of sense in the face of something like an Amoonguss. Is going to stop things like Rage Powder or Spore. And when you were taunted, you didn't have to worry about it. But Iron Bundle going for the Protect this turn will stop any damage. Gothitelle once again just clicking Taunt. If you click Pollen Puff on it though, it is still super effective. It's still going to hurt this turn. Gothitelle going for the Psychic, targets down into the Gothitelle on the opposite side. No longer resisted damage either. Pollen Puff does target in there, and gosh, that does a lot of damage. Really smart play, critical hit, there we go. Really smart play though by Justin Tang, not falling for the bait. Yeah, that is a really big play. Knowing that the Gothitelle could possibly Terrasilize into that Spore immunity, Justin Tang does not fall for it. Correctly calling that Justin Carris wants to preserve that Iron Bundle, which would have been knocked out from an attack by either Pokemon. He opts to go for damage on the Gothitelle instead. And since the Gothitelle did Terrasilize into a Grass type, it takes a lot more damage from the Psychic as well. So a huge turn from Justin Tang there. You know, it looks like it's not doing a whole lot of damage because it's not, but this small amount of damage will really start adding up. Amoonguss does just tank that Hydro Pump there as well from the Iron Bundle. Taunt from Justin Carris' Gothitelle onto Justin Tang's Gothitelle. Does go for the Psychic though, not going to be trying to go for any sort of status move, just getting more damage onto that Gothitelle. Pollen Puff once again targeting in. It's not enough for the knockout, but it does get it really, really close. And this allows for whatever Pokemon are in the back too for Justin Tang to maybe come in and get a sweep with all that chip damage. Yeah, both of these sides have a lot of chip damage on them. The nice thing for Justin Tang though is that if the Iron Bundle on Justin Carris' end goes down, there shouldn't be anything faster than the Flutter Mane. So this Gothitelle clearly in range for any kind of attack to finish it off from Flutter Mane. And this Iron Bundle can't really stick around much longer. It looks like it's going to have to stay on the field this turn though until Justin will reveal his last Pokemon. Great Tusk comes in at this point. Great Tusk no longer has the opportunity to Terrasilize as well. Will still keep that fighting typing. Freeze time into the Amoonguss. It does hang on as well. A really big hang on there. Psychic into the Iron Bundle as well. So big. Really still huge to get that knockout because you still have opportunities to KO that Great Tusk in the back. Amoonguss' Pollen Puff as well into the Great Tusk. It doesn't do a ton of damage there, but hey, chip damage is chip damage, and the taunt's now over, and you don't have to worry. I mean, Gothitelle can come in and taunt you again, probably. Yeah. If those targets had flipped, that would have been a massive turn for Justin Tang, because getting a Psychic on Great Tusk as it comes in would severely limit the amount of turns it has left on the field. It does have that Life Orb, so once it gets down to a pretty low amount of health, it does not have the opportunity to fire off too many more attacks. The Gothitelle, again, on Justin Carris' end, in range for one attack, and I would have a really hard time believing that Justin Carris has a way to defeat the Flutter Mane on Justin Tang's end. Like at this point, one Dazzling Gleam probably just ends the game. I mean, the Gothitelle on the opposite side of the field can go for a Fake Out instead of a taunt. A Fake Out should still knock out the Amoonguss, but a Fake Out into the Gothitelle makes plenty of sense here. That's where your super effective damage is. Gothitelle also taking a Headlong Rush, but is still able to hang on, and you've already taken a defense and special defense drop as the Great Tusk and some more chip damage, and all of this is going to add up. There is a Citrus Berry as well for this Gothitelle on Justin Tang's side, just going to start getting some of that HP back, really showing how bulky these two Pokemon are, and just kind of deal with a lot of this. Gothitelle, Pollen Puff into that Gothitelle is enough to wrap it up here as well, and that is going to put Justin Tang in a great end game position, showing a lot of offensive prowess with Amoonguss. Yeah, Justin Tang's Flutter Mane now will just win the game as soon as it hits the field. You know, a Moonblast from that Flutter Mane, certainly enough to knock out Great Tusk. It cannot Terrasilize away from that Fairy weakness. It already has that -1 special defense. It's taken a little bit of chip damage. There's really not a whole lot left that Justin Carris has to do here, unfortunately. The big Headlong Rush in the Gothitelle, that's big information. Possibly that's not something that he had seen in their prior matches. So knowing that the Headlong Rush is not enough to knock out the Gothitelle is very big information moving forward into a game 2. Gothitelle protecting this turn. An Earthquake, though, will be enough to knock out the Amoonguss. It just had so little HP left. It never got a full paralysis either,
no, it didn't.
Which was really huge for Justin Tang. I think that that the numbers were on their side. Their Arcanine will be the Pokemon to switch in. Last Pokemon revealed. So that is a thing of that Justin Tang has done, is reveal the last Pokemon, which is an interesting piece of information. But the Intimidate does allow you to have a much safer end game, and you can go possibly for something like an Extreme Speed if you need to and just do some big damage.
Yeah, I mean, Justin Tang did have a way to, you know, just finish the game with that Flutter Mane immediately and knock out the Great Tusk without showing the Arcanine. Possibly wanting to show Arcanine, though, and maybe bait Justin Carris into over-adjusting for it in that second game, if that's possibly an option. Otherwise, you would think the Flutter Mane would have come in immediately.
Yeah, another Earthquake here does not bring either of these Pokemon into getting knocked out. Gothitelle Psychic will do super effective damage onto this Great Tusk, definitely enough to get that knockout there. Really great game one of what is, I'm sure, going to be an awesome top 8. Justin Tang showing why he is here in that #1 seed.
Yeah, I really like the way that Justin Tang played that game. You know, the mirror lead, it might have been a little bit wonky just because Justin Carris's Flutter Mane had a lot more offensive potential, but considering Justin Carris didn't take that knockout on the Flutter Mane immediately, he didn't double it with something like a Shadow Ball and a Psychic, it left the Flutter Mane open to fight off those Shadow Balls into Justin Carris's Flutter Mane. Take that knockout with the Shadow Ball plus Moonblast, and then stick around later for after the Iron Bundle had gone down to be kind of a checkmate later on. So the Flutter Mane on Justin Tang's and the Focus Sash coming in very handy there. And from, you know, the 2 turns consecutively where Justin Tang's Flutter Mane was moving first, probably pretty safe to assume, especially given the info about Justin Carris's Flutter Mane that we have from the past, that Justin Tang's is just going to be fast every time. It's not a speed type.
I think something that's interesting to me too, and this is throwing back to yesterday, the Tyranitar coming in and getting a knockout yesterday with the sand. There were a lot of options for that in this game. Had there been something like a setup for that sand stream, you know, having the Focus Sash on the Flutter Mane, if you lead the Tyranitar and your own Flutter Mane, you instantly get that knockout thanks to the sand stream plus going for a Shadow Ball. We saw that that was enough to bring it down into its Focus Sash, and then you still also set up some extra chip damage throughout the rest. You know, you're still getting as much damage off into something like that Amoonguss as you can, because it was still just taking like little itty bits amount of chip damage basically is what it felt like, because it just was able to sit around and be so bulky. You didn't have the Palafin come in either, so if Justin adjusts and tries to account for the fact that Palafin is not coming to this game, it could be a really great way to sneak Tyranitar in. Yeah,
Tyranitar would have been pretty solid against the 4 that Justin Tang brought for sure, and we did just see him lock in with that same 4. So if Justin Carris does opt to bring that Tyranitar as a mix-up, that could be a huge difference maker. The Iron Hands and the Palafin, which are arguably the 2 best answers to Tyranitar and Justin Tang's team, will be left at home.
Looks like Gothitelle Flutter Mane, though, on Justin Carris' side,
there
and Gothitelle Flutter Mane on Justin Tang's side. They have the same first names and the same leads.
They did swap sides, though. We got a little bit of a mix-up.
Yeah, a little bit of a mirror here.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this goes, because we did see the Flutter Mane on Justin Tang's end survive that Shadow Ball with the Focus Sash and not be put out of commission by a Psychic from Justin Carris' Gothitelle. So we now know that there's an option to possibly go for a double target there. The Taunt, I think, is still very valuable because you prevent Trick Room from going up, and if Trick Room goes up, then that means that the Iron Bundle is no longer the fastest thing on the field, which becomes a liability into a bunch of special attackers.
Looks like a Terrestrialization early here. It's actually going to be on that Flutter Mane, not saving it for something like a Terra Grass Gothitelle. The Steel Terra on that Flutter Mane is a great defensive play that we have seen a lot over the past couple of tournaments. Helps with something like a Dazzling Gleam. Protect here, though, means it's not going to be taking any damage, and also a matching Protect from the Gothitelle on Justin Tang's side. You're baiting to see what the options are. You could see something like a Taunt maybe allow you to make a switch. Shadow Ball into the Flutter Mane on Justin Tang's side. You're not getting put down to your Focus Sash just yet, and I think that's pretty important. Gothitelle going for the Taunt into the opposing Gothitelle as well. Like you said, probably trying to stop something like a Trick Room.
I think that's a very, very reasonable play for Justin Carris. Knowing that the Shadow Ball did it didn't one-hit KO the Flutter Mane on his end last game. When you Terrestrialize away from that Ghost weakness, it'll do less than half, so it's not even going to be a 2-hit KO anymore. And so now that knowing you're not going to lose your Flutter Mane this turn, especially because a Shadow Ball Psychic will certainly not knock it out in conjunction. You don't have to worry about taking all that damage on your Flutter Mane and can safely taunt the Gothitelle to prevent a Trick Room.
Yeah, the Flutter Mane here on Justin Tang's side does go for the Shadow Ball into the Gothitelle, which is a much better guaranteed damage output. Gothitelle does take its Citrus Berry, though, and bring it back up to over half of its HP. The Shadow Ball from the Flutter Mane targeting down into what was the Gothitelle, now the Amoonguss. Amoonguss handles that very comfortably. Thunder Wave into the faster Flutter Flutter Mane on the field. Justin Tang still has his Focus Sash, but is now slower.
Yeah, I think that's a really great play for Justin Carris as well, and especially since Agatha swapped out and Trick Room did not go up. Justin Carris probably willing to bet that Tang would not let him taunt that Agatha, prevented Trick Room, leave it on the field without the ability to do anything except use Psychic. So knowing that, Trick Room does not go up, the Amoonguss comes out, the Agatha is now free to taunt the Amoonguss to prevent any spores, and more importantly, your own Flutter Mane will be outspeeding the Flutter Mane on Justin Tang's side of the field.
Yeah, I think the thing is now this Amoonguss, the taunt is just so, it's so safe, right?
Right.
There's just, I mean, even if you don't get the taunt off, right, the Flutter Mane is not going to be able to knock you out, I think. It's going to be, actually, you know what, I think it will get the knockout with a Shadow Ball, so maybe you have to kind of play around that. The Amoonguss, though, could still go for something like a Spore. It is going to Terrastallize here once again into that Dark type. We saw just how effective that was. You're baiting something like a Psychic here. I think Justin Tang is making a bit of a heavy read, saying you're going to go for a Psychic, you're not going to go for a taunt to try and get the knockout because this Amoonguss was so frustrating to deal with. Rage Powder this turn, though, will divert the attention away from that partner Pokemon, who is now moving much, much slower. Will take this Shadow Ball as well from the Gothitelle, from the Flutter Mane on the opposite side of the field. Not very effective now, thanks to that change in typing. Your own Flutter Mane, if you're Justin Tang, going for the Shadow Ball into the Gothitelle is enough to get that knockout. You're not going to get taunted. You are free to set up Spore as much as you want. You are free to Rage Powder and help your own Flutter Mane now in, you know, as best as you can.
Importantly, too, you're also able to switch. You're also able to make use of that regenerator. And that's a really big terastallization. Redirecting that Shadow Ball, if it had not terastallized, it would have taken a big chunk of damage, been in range, certainly from one more Shadow Ball. But the Dark typing means that the Shadow Ball is resisted by that Amoonguss. It frees up the space for his own Flutter Mane to take the knockout on Gothitelle, and now you are no longer facing Shadow Tag, whereas you still have Shadow Tag available to yourself. So that's a great piece of information to have in this mirror, is that you can control when things switch, and now Justin Carris cannot. Great Tusk here actually looking really threatening, though, because this is Earthquake. We do see, I mean, the Focus Sash is still intact, so it's got to be something that Justin Carris keeps out for, but Earthquake, Headlong Rush, Close Combat, all these huge options for damage that it's going to be hard to mitigate if you are Justin Tang here.
Iron Bundle comes in. No Tyranitar in there. Tyranitar would have been a really cool switch in. Iron Bundle, though, with the Quark Drive. Great Tusk going for a Protect this turn, maybe trying to see what the options are on Justin Tang's side of the field. The Rage Powder, once again, not going to be directing anything, as there is no offensive output from Justin Carris' side of the field. This Flutter Mane able to go for the Moonblast, but targets down into the Protect on the Great Tusk, so that the Iron Bundle able to get in for free.
Iron Bundle doesn't come in for free, which is nice for Justin Carris. I don't know if a Hydro Pump would knock out Amoonguss. No. Freeze Dry certainly would not. So if you want to damage the Flutter Mane, you're either going to have to use 2 spread moves with the Icy Wind and Earthquake and put your own Iron Bundle in peril, which honestly is not a bad option, especially considering that would break the Sash, and then take 2 knockouts should neither Pokemon protect. But the Amoonguss sticking around, Rage Powdering, knowing that if Justin wanted to Earthquake, the Talonflame is very, very likely not the 4th Pokemon that Justin Carris had brought, given how the start of the game played out.
Flutter Mane protecting here. Still no full paralysis is on Justin Tang's side. The Icy Wind, though, from the Iron Bundle on Justin Carris' side, targeting down, does connect onto that Amoonguss. Does a nice chunk of damage still as well.
There's the Earthquake
from the Great Tusk is not going to connect into the Flutter Mane here. Will hit into its own Iron Bundle partner, but you most importantly knock out the Amoonguss. And Iron Bundle still fast, still able to do big damage, knowing that you have probably a tough chance, of 1 in 3 chance to protect with a double protect on that Flutter Mane.
Yeah, I really like that play. Even though you do damage your own Iron Bundle, you get so much more out of that turn if you were able to take that double knockout. The Flutter Mane protecting, you know, I get that. I think that's a really smart play, just to even bait that out. You know, if the Great Tusk does go for that Earthquake play, which I think was a very smart play, you essentially force damage onto the Iron Bundle that you didn't have to do yourself. So another Iron Bundle certainly in range from a Psychic, a Shadow Ball, a Dazzling, or a Moonblast rather, from that Flutter Mane. And more importantly, the Great Tusk can no longer Earthquake next to its partner. Like, certainly because the Flutter Mane in the back is also a Steel type, so you really don't want to be doing that.
I mean, you have the opportunity to go for another Icy Wind plus something like a Headlong Rush and try and get that knockout. You need 2 attacks on this Flutter Mane. This feels like an amazing time for Trick Room if you can get it up if you're Justin Tang. Flutter Mane flips back out of the way here, though, not wanting to stay on the field. Arcanine comes in, a great way to set some Intimidate onto that Great Tusk. You may take something like a Hydro Pump if you don't really want to, but an Icy Wind isn't going to feel too bad here. You have the opportunity to go for extreme speeds. Iron Bundle is not particularly healthy at this point. Freeze Dry not doing a lot of damage if you're the Arcanine. Headlong Rush, though, also targeting down. Super effective damage, does get the knockout there on that Arcanine, meaning at this point point that the Gothitelle is still free to act. Hasn't had anything, even with the Protect, it's still safe to do something on that next turn.
Yeah, it's a great call out with that Gothitelle coming in. The Shadow Tag is now active. Trick Room is huge though here because now the Fluttermane is paralyzed. It should be able to act before all of the Iron Bundle, the Great Tusk, and the Fluttermane on Justin Carris' side of the field. I believe that the Iron Bundle and the Great Tusk are both in range for a Psychic knockout too, which makes this even tougher for Justin Carris. The -1 special defense from Headlong Rush is contributing pretty well to that. Something like a Shadow Ball here is really the only option if you're this Fluttermane because you really can't afford to Moonblast a Fluttermane on the switch. Shadow Ball into a bundle is more than enough damage, and I think the Fluttermane on Justin Carris' side of the field is going to be the most difficult thing to take down because we have seen it's very bulky. It is that Steel type now. It's going to be resisting Moonblast, not taking super effective damage from Shadow Ball, and resisting Psychic from the Gothitelle as well.
We are starting out with Protects, the most common turn 1 Trick Room move here. Gothitelle Psychic into the Great Tusk, not going to connect thanks to that Protect for this first turn of Trick Room. The Fluttermane finally gets the full paralysis just when it does not want to. That's me absolutely cursing that. Iron Bundle's Freeze Dry into that Fluttermane. Does do a little chunk of damage. Most importantly, you've broken that Focus Sash.
And credit to Justin Carris there too. He knew that the Psychic probably goes into the Great Tusk and Shadow Ball probably goes into the Iron Bundle. That's the most straightforward play if you're Justin Tang. And knowing that you did get that Thunderwave onto Fluttermane, and you take the 1 in 4 chance that if it gets fully paralyzed, you take no damage this turn, you break the Focus Sash. That's a really big play for Justin Carris there, and making the smart play and getting rewarded for it with that paralysis as well.
Yeah, I mean, the Fluttermane on Justin Tang's side only has single target moves, but it also has Perish Song. And
Correct.
you actually can't really switch out here, right?
Yeah.
Because of that Fluttermane. So you could have the opportunity. I think if you take 1 knockout here, you have a really good Perish Song opportunity. Iron Bundle going to Protect. It's tough when you have 2 Pokemon left, right? Perish Song it never feels safe when you have 2 Pokemon left. Gothitelle Psychic, though, into the Great Tusk is enough to get that knockout as well. So Great Tusk at least out of the way. The Fluttermane in the back is a Terra Steel. It is so tough to break through. Fluttermane Shadow Ball, though, into the Protect on the opposite side. Not going to do any damage.
I would wager there's no chance that the Fluttermane on Justin Carris' side of the field doesn't survive this turn without probably 2 critical hits from both Psychic and Shadow Ball. And I think if you're Justin Tang, that's kind of the only out you have to play to at this point, especially because the Fluttermane, being that Steel type, there's really not a whole lot you can do to damage it all in one chunk.
Yeah, Fluttermane protecting this turn, not going to be able to put out any output here. Iron Bundle goes for the double protect, does not get it after having that protect on the last turn. Gothitelle Psychic will target down into that Iron Bundle. This should easily be enough to take that knockout. It's a 2-on-1, but one Pokemon has double target options, the other one does not. It also has a super effective Shadow Ball onto multiple Pokemon.
Okay.
The Shadow Ball into the Fluttermane means that this Gothitelle is still free for the next turn, and that shows that it is locked into Shadow Ball because of its choice specs.
I think that's a smart lock. A Shadow Ball knocks out either of these Pokemon. I believe we've seen the choice specs Fluttermane knock out the Gothitelle in 1 hit before. And now at this point, again, you have to kind of hope for no full paralysis from your own Fluttermane. That would almost certainly lose the game for you immediately. You have to hope for some high damage rolls, I imagine. Oh, and the paralysis!
And the full paralysis there. That is rough if you're our Justin Tang. This Shadow Ball here should be enough plenty easily to get that knockout. Justin Carris is taking this to a Game 3 for his top 8.
He is. I don't see a way for Justin Tang to come back to this, especially with Trick Room ending there. I don't know that paralysis really mattered, right? Because even if you look at the damage, I don't think a critical hit Shadow Ball would have been enough.
You would have needed like 7 or 8 Psychics, I think, just to match enough damage.
The full paralysis earlier in the game certainly helped because he was able to break that Focus Sash with the Iron Bundle thanks to the full paralysis. Actually, eating 1 Shadow Ball, that's actually really good to know for both players. Maybe that Gothitelle trained a lot more in special defense than some we've seen earlier on in the day. But that Shadow Ball, even with an extra Psychic, I really doubt that Shadow Ball would have been enough to take a KO, even with a big critical hit, just because Fluttermane does have such good special defense.
There's one critical hit. Yeah, I think you need a couple more of those.
A little bit too little too late, but
especially
prepping itself for next game.
Yeah, but I mean, honestly, here's the thing. That's actually good for Justin Tang to know exactly how much a critical hit Psychic into the Terra Steel
honestly,
does. Yeah. That's actually important information. If you're Justin Tang, I'm sure you're actually kind of happy to have that at the end of the day. Justin Carris does now show how good that defensive Terra typing is with that Fluttermane. It just is so tough to beat, and the fact that the Arcanine didn't really do enough, I think, is probably the biggest problem because that was your way through it.
Yeah, and Fluttermane doesn't like seeing Arcanine on the other side of the field at any point, especially if it turns into a Steel type. A lot of them are trained to be able to take something like a Flare Blitz, but if you turn into a Steel type, you certainly can't. Unfortunately for Justin Tang, the Arcanine coming in and immediately getting knocked out meant that it never had the chance to stare down that Steel type Fluttermane, threaten a Will-O-Wisp, threaten a, not even Will-O-Wisp Fluttermane, but threaten a Flare Blitz, for a big knockout onto it. And I don't know that the Arcanine is doing a whole lot for Justin Tang here. It came in and got knocked out twice in a row without much productivity.
I know. I mean, the extreme speed looked so good there with the Iron Bundle as well, because it was definitely in extreme speed range. The Flare Blitz would have been great, but it was just such a great call by Justin Carris to go for that double target into that slot, instead letting that Gothitelle protect for free, basically. You're not worried too much about it, and getting a big knockout. I think that double target was pretty safe, because you would have knocked out whatever was in that position, even if it was something that came in on a switch in, because you're putting so much offensive pressure into it. And I think now we're probably going to have to be careful to see if there's another Gothitelle Flutter Mane lead, or if Justin Tang or Justin Carris try and switch things up.
Well, the good thing if you're Justin Carris is that, in theory, the Tyranitar is very good into the 4 that you've been seeing, but if you do happen to catch a mix-up with the Iron Hands or the Palafin with that Tyranitar, it would be much rougher to use. You did, however, just win that game pretty convincingly without the Tyranitar, so now you don't have to risk possibly throwing that Tyranitar out in front of an Iron Hands, in front of a Palafin that might make that Tyranitar a bit of a worthless bring, especially if it is next to the Gothitelle with the Shadow Tag.
Tyranitar is definitely trying not to catch hands in this
tournament.
Oh my sorry, God. That was really not. That wasn't worth it. Here we are going to be going into game 3. Had to set that off before we had the actual good action.
You were so
game
ready for that too. I saw you at the corner of my eye.
Flutter Mane from Justin Carris. Flutter Mane and Arcanine though.
Okay.
Arcanine does give a little bit of opportunity, I think, with some Flare Blitzes right now.
I like this. Yeah, you threaten a Flare Blitz onto the Flutter Mane. You don't have Snarl. Notably, if you had Snarl and Arcanine, Justin Tang does not. However, that would be nice for lowering some special attack. But I like this mix-up, because Flare Blitz does threaten a lot of damage onto Flutter Mane, obviously. They'll do a good chunk to the Gothitelle, and the Great Tusk and the Iron Bundle in the back for Justin Carris, should that be the 2 he brought again. Neither of them really want to take a Flare Blitz either, and you especially risk the burn if it's the Great Tusk. Yeah,
protect here on the Flutter Mane on Justin Tang's side. Arcanine also going for the protect. Again, when you have a Choice Specs user on the opposite side of the field, it really is nice to just take that first low turn. Shadow Ball targets into the Arcanine this turn as well, not targeting into the Flutter Mane on the opposite side. Thunder Wave also targeting down actually into the Flutter Mane that turn. So seeing how Justin Carris is prioritizing that speed drop on Justin Tang's Flutter Mane.
I like that play just to scout out the Flutter Mane's Choice Specs lock, to scout out the possible fake out from Gothitelle. And now you give yourself the option, possibly some combination of like extreme speed to chip the Gothitelle and then do some damage with Shadow Ball, maybe for a knockout. Unfortunately, you cannot do the same thing to Flutter Mane because it is that ghost type. There's the Tyranitar
actually has come into this game. A great call from Justin Carris to have some good damage and get rid of this Focus Sash. The Shadow Ball, though, from Justin Tang's Flutter Mane into the Flutter Mane on the opposite side of the field does do a lot of damage, but this Shadow Ball into the Flutter Mane on Justin Tang's side will bring it down to the Focus Sash, and that Flutter Mane is not going to be able to stick around at the end of this turn. And that is really the power of Tyranitar with these Pokemon that just take so much chip damage throughout the set. Arcanine's Flare Blitz into the Flutter Mane. We have no more Flutter Manes on the field, and they started all of our games.
Name a more iconic duo than Justin Carris and swapping in Tyranitar to break Focus Sashes or knock out things at 1 or 2 HP. That's the 3rd time we've seen it on stream this weekend.
Oh, absolutely.
Really
I think
smart
you're right.
though. That's just so smart, because like we saw that there's no Palafin, there's no Iron Hands, there will be no catching of hands in this game, and so the Tyranitar now is poised to be a huge threat. Gothitelle and Arcanine both really hate seeing Tyranitar. You do have the option to burn it. You know, you can't prevent the burn with a Fire Terror or something. He's that flying type, so the burn will happen, but I don't see a whole lot of ways for this Tyranitar to be damaged at all.
I don't think this Tyranitar even wants to go for a Terastallization here.
No,
I think
you
can save that because you have the opportunity to go. I mean, its Terastallization is flying, right?
Yeah.
At this point, with the Dark and the Rock typing, you already really kind of stall out any damage from the Gothitelle. It cannot touch you. Arcanine cannot do much damage either without really kind of hurting itself in the process with Flare Blitz or just some chip with the extreme speed. Gothitelle, though, for Justin Carris, it came in and immediately switched back out, bringing in the Iron Bundle. And this just looks really strong for Justin at this point in the game.
It's going to be so hard for Justin Tang to deal with this Tyranitar. Like, I don't know, even with a burn, you still have to get some damage on it before it just starts firing off Rock Slides or Crunches or anything that'll just chip away at your Pokemon. And it, like, that's such a smart bring, especially the way he used it. He brought it in on up top, like even just the way he switched it into an Arcanine and Flutter Mane. The worst thing that could happen to that Tyranitar was probably Extreme Speed Shadow Ball, which would have both done nothing. It would have bounced right off.
It's such a safe switch.
And so, like, that Flutter Mane mirror is something that lost Justin Carris the game in Game 1 because of that Focus Ash, because the Iron Bundle was no longer around to finish off the Flutter Mane. But now you just immediately eliminate it, which is so big.
Right now, though, double protect with a Rock Slide, so no damage damage on the opposite side of the field, if you are Justin Tang, Trick Room is your priority.
Yes, I think it has to be.
Trick Room is your priority. That is your way to win this game. Iron Bundle becomes really tough to deal with. You could switch out the, maybe you can switch out and have the Amoonguss come in and handle some of that damage. This is a really cool terastallization that this is the Terra Water on the Gothitelle, and that is a great way to maybe not take as much damage from something like a Crunch on the opposite side. Actually seeing the Terra flying here on that Tyranitar does give it, I think, a little bit of safety and back. You don't, I think Justin Tang has not revealed that fourth Pokemon yet either, and so Justin Carris may be prepping for something like a Palafin to come in, or even just something like the Iron Hands, but instead the Terra Water on the Gothitelle does allow you to not take that super effective damage from those dark type attacks that Tyranitar is just so happy to carry. Icy Wind also. Arcanine avoids it this turn, interestingly enough.
Nice.
Huge into not have that speed drop. Gothitelle does take the speed drop. It's not going to be too mad if it gets its move off. Will-O-Wisp into the Tyranitar does help deal with this Tyranitar a little bit more moving forward, especially this Terastallization, I think, makes Justin a little bit more comfortable. Terra Blast with this Terra flying, though, is going to target down, I believe, into the Arcanine here. Arcanine really handles that so well. Looks like it may have been Trick Room, may have been a switch chance, but Trick Room from this Gothitelle, this is Justin's way back in.
Yeah, Justin Tang definitely cleared out a way for him to possibly win this game now. The Tyranitar is no longer resisting Flare Blitz, so we do get the opportunity to fire Flare Blitz into that slot. That damage will be significant, and it will stick and start adding up with the burn and the sand chip damage. I always think it's so funny when Tyranitar sets the sand, terastallizes away from a rock type, and now takes damage from its own sand. But the Icy Wind miss is really nice there, especially the case of the Tyranitar had gone for Rock Slide, but even then, you got to burn the Tyranitar before that Terra Blast. Your Arcanine is taking a lot less damage, and it gets to stick around a little bit longer. We're also approaching the range for that Mago Berry. If you were thinking that Arcanine, if it had the Citrus Berry, it would have activated it by now. Been up around 75% health, but now you have to wait a couple more turns and possibly hope that Justin Carris doesn't chip it around that range.
Psychic into that Iron Bundle. Tyranitar going for a Rock Slide this turn isn't enough to knock out the Arcanine, but that'll activate the Mago Berry there. Really nice to be able to get a good amount of HP back and still be able to fire off a strong move like the Flare Blitz, but it gets the flinch, and there is Justin Carris's big break, I think. The freeze dry into the Gothitelle. Could freeze? No freeze. Okay, I was just going to see what the luck looked like here. Gothitelle is able to eat its Citrus Berry, though, regain some of that HP, but really showing that Icy Wind miss is actually great for Justin Carris.
It was. So it looked bad at first because you did get burned before you got that Terra Blast stop, but had that Icy Wind connected, like you said, Arcanine would have undersped the Tyranitar most likely and been able to fire off what was presumably a Flare Blitz that turn to knock out the Iron Bundle. So that Rock Slide flinch, massive for Justin Carris because it looked like Justin Tang was starting to kind of claw his way back into this game. But now that the Arcanine is no longer healthy, it looks like one more Rock Slide may be able to finish it off from here. It might be a little bit close, especially with that sand damage. Probably is enough, but now Arcanine has to be wary of one more Rock Slide taking it out, and the Iron Bundle getting a big freeze dry off in the Gothitelle there. That's a lot of damage.
I really hope there's a Terra Flying Terra Blast into that Amoonguss this turn, or even a freeze dry. Gothitelle protecting this turn. Iron Bundle also going to be protecting this turn. Is an extreme speed range, so that does make a lot of sense. Rock Slide from the Tyranitar is going to at least go down, possibly into this Amoonguss. Amoonguss will take a little tiny bit of chip damage. Doesn't do a whole lot here, but Amoonguss isn't going to be able to Terastallize. Sand has now ended, and you cannot switch out.
You can't. The benefit of Terastallizing the Tyranitar here, though, is that the Pollen Puff does significantly less damage to that Tyranitar. So if you are able to fire off a Terra Blast, even a burned Terra Blast, possibly at -1 if the Arcanine comes back in, the damage is not going to be insignificant, especially because we know that the Amoonguss is holding Covert Cloak. It is not Citrus Berry, it doesn't have a way to heal itself without switching out, and now this Amoonguss, it doesn't love facing down this flying type Tyranitar that it can't even put to sleep because it is burned.
Iron Bundle goes for the double protect and does not get it this turn. Pollen Puff from the Amoonguss into that partner Pokemon of the Gothitelle. This is the best way to keep it healthy at this stage in the competition. Gothitelle Psychic will go off as well into that Iron Bundle. That'll be easily enough to get that knockout now, and that keeps the Arcanine in the back pretty free because you're not going to be worried about taking something like a big Hydro Pump. But Terra Blast from the Tyranitar is going to target down into the Amoonguss. I don't think it does enough damage because that burn was just so impactful.
Yeah, I agree. It looks like one more Terra Blast may not be able to finish off that KO. It's going to be very close. But Justin Carris now down to his last two Pokemon, the Gothitelle and the Tyranitar. Again, the Tyranitar is burned. It is not doing as much damage as you would want it to do, especially if the Gothitelle on Justin Tang's end swaps out for that Intimidate like we might just see here. Either way, that's a big Pollen Puff, though. Since the Tyranitar is burned, the Tyranitar is burned and Gothitelle did Terastallize away from that Psychic typing, there's no crunch, super effective crunch that could do a lot of damage. So having that Gothitelle very healthy is very nice, because now you can just start chipping away at that Tyranitar with Psychic if that's the option you go for here.
Yeah, protect from the Amoonguss, but fake out into the Gothitelle, who does not have the opportunity to protect Tyranitar. With the Terra Blast, targets down into the Amoonguss. This is kind of wrapping up these Trick Room turns here, and this has been an incredibly back and forth game.
For sure. It's going to be really tough to see how this ends. The Tyranitar the Arcanine coming back in at the end of this game, the Tyranitar does not have Protect. So if you're able to get more chip damage on it with something like Psychic, or even Pollen Puff doing a little bit more damage, it might be in range of Flare Blitz by the time the Arcanine comes back in, which will be a very relevant bit of damage there, especially because the Tyranitar did Terastallize away from that fire resistance.
Yeah, I mean, the Amoonguss here also looks really strong because you can still Rage Powder if you need to. I mean, Rock Slide won't really matter too much, but you could Spore. There is not going to be a Grass Terastallization on that Gothitelle on the other side of the field. This Arcanine here really coming in to help stop some of this damage from the Tyranitar with that Intimidate. It is, like you said, already burned. You got to hope for maybe a big critical hit here. We saw exactly how much damage this did. Was not a lot in comparison, thanks to that Intimidate especially. I think that might have still been a roll without it. Gothitelle going for a taunt into the Arcanine. Not a great option there, because Arcanine is just going to happily click Extreme Speed. Pollen Puff into the Arcanine as well. Will heal that back to almost full HP, and Justin Tang is playing this end game as strategically as he can.
That's a big risk, swapping an Arcanine into a low health Arcanine even into a Tyranitar. A -1 Rock Slide plus a Psychic from Gothitelle probably gets that knockout if Justin Carris was able to predict that. But the Terra Blast doing paltry damage to that Amoonguss, the Pollen Puff healing Arcanine up to a level where it's going to be very difficult to knock out, especially because we've seen Tyranitar be faster than Gothitelle. There's no chance that Amoonguss has to take a Psychic before an attack from that Tyranitar, maybe limit some spread damage later on. But big Flare Blitz probably coming out here from this Arcanine.
Yeah, Arcanine's Flare Blitz into the Tyranitar. It's not enough to get the knockout, but the Burn Chip will help, so you have to deal with whatever the Tyranitar is able to throw out this turn. It's a Rock Slide. You have the Protect into the Amoonguss, so that's not going to connect, but you may really need this Connect onto the Arcanine to do big damage. It doesn't do enough because of those Protects and the Burn and the Intimidate. The Psychic targeted down into the Amoonguss as well. Not enough damage, I think, from Justin. That Burn Chip will take the Tyranitar to get knocked out at this point.
This was such a back and forth game.
Like, oh my goodness,
there were so many times when the momentum flipped from one player to the other. I think they've both been such a good job keeping themselves in this game, but it's looking like Justin Tang is going to be the one moving on to top 4 here, because his Arcanine, his Amoonguss, his Gothitelle, all facing down Justin Carris' solo Gothitelle, and enough damage from Flare Blitz, Pollen Puff, Psychic. It looks like it should be enough.
Yeah, you can even put it to sleep if you want to guarantee. Flare Blitz is a 2-hit knockout here, which is still so much damage, right? Gothitelle does have that Citrus Berry, so it will take, I think, 2 more of those. It would need to anyway, without whatever the residual is from possibly a Pollen Puff. Thunder Wave avoids here on the Amoonguss. Not going to be able to get a full paralysis, which is what Justin Carris needed. Spore into the Gothitelle is going to put that to sleep, at least for the next turn. You can go for a Flare Blitz, you can go for a Pollen Puff, and that should be enough to do it. Yeah, that Thunder Wave miss, maybe like the last shred of hope Justin had there, possibly hoping for some full paralysis shenanigans. But looks like Justin Tang, his very first regional, moving on to top 4 in Knoxville, Tennessee. Absolutely huge from both